and say hello to Michael Cottam. Welcome, sir. Good to have you with us.
Hello, Matt. Hello, everybody. Great to be
So,
here.
Michael, we've been doing these kind of annual updates with you for a couple of years now on SEO. You were kind of the top result on our Google search a few years ago when we looked for SEO experts. So we thought he's got to be the best in the business, and you've certainly proven that. And we're planning on just doing a regular old SEO webinar, but it's turning into something totally different with all the new technologies coming out. So yeah, I don't want to really take up any more time. I'll just pass it right off to Michael. And if you want to share your screen, Michael's got a great presentation for us that's going to outline, first of all, updates on Google, just basic SEO stuff, but also how ChatGPT is going to be influencing the whole landscape. So hopefully you have permissions to share. Okay, you're good to go. All right.
Good to go. All right, everybody, what we're going to talk about today, general update, we're going to focus just on a couple of areas, though. Google's helpful content updates, which is actually fairly closely tied. There's a lot of connections there with AI and ChatGPT. We're going to talk about Google's link spam updates and also expertise, authority, and trust, which is a new kind of way of looking at ranking that Google's been using for the past couple of years. And then at the end of this presentation, we'll look about good ways and bad ways to use AI generated content, who the players are out there besides ChatGPT, because they've gotten all the press, but they're not the only game in town. And we're going to actually play a little bit with the new Bing and ChatGPT4. So first of all, let's start talking about Google's helpful content updates. So the general idea is Google is trying to go after and remove from the search results sites and content that's purely designed to get search traffic and make money instead of actually helping people, answering questions, presenting a different opinion, real news, etc. They're looking for sites and they're looking to target these sites and remove them from the search results if they're designed just to rank and then make some money off of AdSense versus sites that are actually designed for humans. So typical newspaper site, of course, your articles are designed to rank and get found and get shared and things like that, but there's real news there. So when you then go make money on AdSense, well, that's fine. What Google's looking for is sites that have generated not necessarily complete garbage, but the same stuff you can find anyplace else. And they've just built the sites to suit Google and get that traffic. And they don't really care what happens when people land on that page. In fact, if they don't read the page and click on the ads, that's even better for them. So those are the kinds of sites Google's looking to go after. What they want to reward is content that shows there's firsthand information or firsthand or different opinions versus something that's summarizing other people's work or scraping content off of other sites, things like that. So the next thing we need to know a little bit about before we move forward is machine learning. So Google's helpful content update uses machine learning. And the signals that they're using get applied to their algorithm over many months. So as a simple example of machine learning, let's say I'm this black hat SEO wizard and I create a page that ranks for what is ChatGPT. But the page itself is trying to sell Bitcoin. And so my page title is Buy Bitcoin Now. If I get this page to rank in a search for what is ChatGPT and the headline that shows in the search results is Buy Bitcoin Now, I'm going to get no clicks, right? First of all, because nobody's buying Bitcoin, but second of all, because it's not what I searched for. It's nothing related to what I searched for. So no matter what kinds of tricks I played to get that page to rank, I'm not going to get many clicks. When, for the next 1,000 people that search for what is ChatGPT, Google's going to see that nobody clicked on this Bitcoin page. So whatever's in that, whatever that's about, that's not a good answer. And so their machine learning will decide to stop showing that article in the results after some period of time. It might be a couple of weeks, a couple of months. A counterexample of that is, let's say I search for Tahiti weather and a page comes up and the page title is best time of year to go to French Polynesia. Well, just like my first example, that search term doesn't match that page title, but a human looking at that would go, oh yeah, that sounds like it has the answer I'm looking for. The best time of year to go to French Polynesia is going to tell me about the weather in Tahiti. And so that is going to get a positive number of clicks, an appropriate number of clicks through for every 1,000 searches. And so Google's machine learning would go, oh, okay, so Tahiti weather must be very closely related to best time of year to go to French Polynesia. And so they're gathering this data and these results for what people click on and don't click on and things like that from Google searches, from little tracking links in the searches, and stuffing that in a database and using machine learning to decide, is this a good answer to that question or a bad answer to that question? So let's look at the kinds of things that Google is learning from. And we can get a lot of clues in Google's announcement of that helpful content update. Unlike a lot of Google's announcements where it's kind of vague hand waving and says, oh, just make better content for users and don't worry your pretty little head about our algorithm, they're actually giving us some specific things that they're looking for that are positive and negative. So one of them, and this is copied straight from their announcement, is the content primarily to attract people from search engines rather than made for humans. Well, what might that mean? Well, like my first example with the Bitcoin and ChatGPT, Google can measure whether the content is really good for humans by the amount of time somebody spends between when they click on the search result to go look at that page about Bitcoin. Let's say they click through, or the French Polynesia page, before they say, nope, this is not helping me, to click the back button and they click on something else. If the average time between when they click on your result and they click the back button and click something else is 10 or 12 seconds, that's a really bad sign. If the average is 2 or 3 minutes, and then they click the back button and click on something else, maybe they didn't get 100% of the information they wanted, or maybe they want a second opinion, but hey, they stuck around your page for 2 minutes, so there must have been some good stuff on it. So this is one of the things they're going to be looking at with the helpful content update. Another clue, they say, are you producing lots of content on different topics in the hopes that some of it might perform well in search results? And what they're really talking about here is things like templated city pages, where you've got the same content every page, you've just stuffed a different city name in it. So, a page with top plumbers in Philadelphia, top plumbers in Seattle, top plumbers in Portland. And all you've done is stuff the word Portland, Seattle, and Philadelphia in there, and you're generating that same list. That's what they're looking to punish. They're also looking to see if you're using automation to generate content on lots of topics without actually writing it. And that should sound a bit like ChatGPT to you. Another clue in their announcement. Are you writing about things simply because they're trending, or would you write about them otherwise for your audience? And so think about news categories on your website. When you've got related stories, let's say there's a development going in on a highway, you probably got a whole bunch of stories about that same development and the funding and when it's starting and businesses having to move or whatever happens to be over a period of time. There's going to be a bunch of different pieces of stories about that. Or it might just be a section about local politics where you have a story about the mayor. You've probably got 5 or 6 other stories where the mayor's mentioned. However, if you do a local news story about ChatGPT and you've never written about it before, that's probably not going to be very helpful because you probably don't have any authority there. Now, that might not be true. Maybe the guy that wrote it lives in your town. You're featuring a local person, who's made it big. Okay, that's an exception. So let's look at an example from our hometown. The related stories is an excellent way to show Google that that you've actually written about other things that are related to that. And so the related stories is using NLP, natural language processing, to pick out relationships between the things that are in these stories versus some of the very simplistic stuff you might find in WordPress, which just looks for tags or keywords and things like that. So this is a big step up from that. More clues in Google's helpful content update announcement. And this one I think is pretty important and pretty easy to measure. So does your content leave readers feeling like they need to search again? So they're clearly here talking about clicking the back button and clicking on another result. So measuring whether people bounce back to the search results and click another site or not is a clue. And if they do bounce back, how quickly do they bounce back? So if they search for something like, does the new Bing use ChatGPT4? And they click into your result and you say, yes. and maybe you reference some authority or something like that. They might never click back to the search results, and Google's going to see that as a perfect page because clearly the people are getting the 100% of the answer from your one page. They don't need to go back. Now, let's say people click in and they see yes, and they're not sure they believe you and they want confirmation. So they read your story and your rationale and your references, then they click back and check another one. If they've taken some time on that page, that's a pretty positive signal. Versus if they click in and your story is vague and that doesn't answer the question, or there's not very much of a story there, they're going to bounce back quick, and Google's going to be able to see that signal. And they're going to determine, hey, this content was not helpful, at least not for that search term. The other thing that's important is, are you covering related topics? So if you dive in to an answer to a question on a page, and there's some things you don't understand, like, well, what is machine learning, and what is AI, and what's this Jasper thing? You know, are you either covering related topics or at least linking out to other documents on the web that might cover those topics? Now let's talk about Google spam updates and link spam updates. And this they've hit a couple of times in the past 12 months. They're going hot and heavy over link spam. And Google talks a pretty big story about how good they are at spotting toxic links and link spam and ignoring it. But really, all they've done so far, I would say they're in kindergarten at this point on going after link spam. They're taking the super weak spammy domains, so sites that are created just by scraping other people's content. You know, they're scraping directories to make their own directory and hoping to get, you know, some searches for business names or whatever happens to be. And there's thousands of these kinds of domains out there. They're taking these and they're simply not counting them towards page rank, which is the factor that is kind of a popularity factor that helps your site rank. So if you've been spending money offshore to get links from really weak sites with really low domain authority, like 5 kind of level, then if you didn't see it hit your traffic in October and December of 2022, then the clock is ticking. This is kind of their first cut. So October was the first one, and they basically clearly just stopped counting links from a whole pile of the super weak spam domains. December they did an update, not quite as severe. So here's an example from one of my clients. So this client, they make replica license plates for antique California cars. So that's a pretty narrow niche, and it's only a small piece of his business. His backlinks, he only had links from 58 domains. About half of those were these super weak spammy scraper sites. This is what happened to his traffic on October 22nd. He lost more than half his traffic, and he didn't have any negative SEO going on or anything else change on the site. His page rank merely got cut in half because Google was counting all this absolute garbage that, you know, most of us in the SEO community would have thought, no, they would have caught up to that like 5 years ago and stopped counting it. Google is way behind their talk. They're walking the walk, but they're way behind what they're talking about. All right, let's talk about E.E.A.T. For the past year or two, Google's been talking about E.A.T, expertise, authority, and trust. And just recently, they've added a new piece to this. And so when they announce something like this, they're basically proclaiming to the world that these are the things we're looking for in order to rank a page well or poorly. Sorry. These are the kinds of factors we're going after, and therefore this is what you should be doing to improve your content. So as of December 2022, they added this new E to the front for experience. And what they're looking for is, do you actually have some sort of hands-on experience with the thing you're writing about? If it's a product review, did you actually try the product? Did you take your own pictures of it or using the manufacturer's pictures? Did you write your own opinion in your description, or did you copy the manufacturer's description like most e-commerce sites do? If it's a write-up, let's say it's a restaurant review in a newspaper, did you actually visit the restaurant, or did you just write stuff based on what you read about their menu? Do you have pictures of the food that you had there, that sort of stuff? They're looking to reward those kinds of real reviews, real opinions, versus stuff that you've mechanically scraped off of someplace else. So, a crime scene report. Did you republish what you found someplace else? Or did your reporter take some pictures and actually do an interview? This is the sort of stuff they're looking to evaluate, to decide on the quality of the content. How good is this content about whatever that topic is? Expertise is the second E, and this is a little bit different. So here they're looking to try to determine if the author of this piece of content has any credentials in the space. So, if I write an article about SEO, I've also written articles lots of other places about SEO in very strong sites, and so I should have some credentials. If I go to write an article about mortgage refi, I don't have any credentials there. So no matter how many places I've been published or spoken or how many links I have, somebody should not trust anything I write about mortgage refi, because it would be my first ever article about it. Authoritativeness. So whereas expertise, we're kind of talking about the author of the piece of content on the page. With authoritativeness, we're talking about the publisher, so the owner of the website. So does this website write about this topic on a regular basis? Or is this the first time you've ever written about ChatGPT or whatever happens to be? The importance of your article archives here is a big deal, because keeping your past articles on topics available to Google, not just to people clicking through, but available to Google, allows Google to see that, oh, yes, you've actually written about machine learning once last year and once 2 years before that, and about AI, last September, et cetera, and so these are related. If Google can actually get in and see those old articles that are related and linked together, then Google can say, okay, this isn't your first rodeo on writing about AI and machine learning. You've got 3 or 4 in that series. And I'm using AI as an example, but it's a same thing about, if you've only ever written one restaurant review for your newspaper, you're probably not going to rank very well. Whereas the exact same piece of content, if you have 30 other restaurant reviews in the past couple of years, is probably going to rank better. Last factor is trustworthiness. And honestly, this is just another word for links. So Google's looking to see if other big trusted organizations link to you as indications that they trust your content and reference your content. All right.
Hey, Michael, I got a quick question for you.
Sure.
While we're on that. Actually, could you help us drive home this point just a little bit on how newspapers specifically can establish each of these? Because I'm hearing you talk about expertise, and I'm picturing, like we need author profiles probably on the site, or author archives in a section, something like that.
And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but let's run through some of this specifically. So with experience, you want an original photo. So one of the things that I live in Bend, Oregon, and our newspaper, The Bulletin, often does with crime stories is they use the same picture of a police car's light bar if they don't actually have a picture. If you use that over and over and over again, that doesn't show that you were there, you visited the scene of whatever happened, and so that would be bad. Using an original picture, whether it was of that scene or not, Google can't tell, but original picture would give Google a clue that, okay, maybe you have something about this story that not everybody else has. If you have a big, a fairly major crime or political story or whatever, you'll get all of the newspapers in the state covering it and saying almost the exact same thing. Google's looking for the one that has their own photo that nobody else has, that has their own write-up and details, and maybe an interview and a name of a person they interviewed that nobody else has, that sort of stuff. So that's the experience example. Expertise, no more articles written by Tribune staff, because that's not a person. And not only that is, if you say the article is by Michael Cottam, that's not enough. You need to have a bio section that says Michael Cottam writes a regular column in the XYZ and is also the author of this and speaks at this event or something like that. As an example, here in Bend, we've got Gary Lewis, who's he writes about the outdoors. He has a number of hunting and fishing books he's written, and he has a TV show. So that's the sort of stuff you would list in the little bio block for every single article that Gary Lewis writes. That's how you're demonstrating that author's expertise. Authoritativeness, related stories is a big deal. making sure Google can see all of your old stories. The Vancouver Columbian, as an example, up in Vancouver, Washington, after a couple of years, they archived the news stories and they're no longer available to crawl for Google or humans to see. They just delete them. That's nuts. Having those past stories gives Google the ability to see, have you covered this before, or is this, your first rodeo in this topic? And trustworthiness, this is links, right? And it's not just links these days, but it's also mentions in social media. So doing some promotion on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook is worthwhile, because when Google sees people reshare your posts about those stories, what Google ends up seeing is this one page for this one story on your site has 115 different people who thought it was interesting enough to reshare. So that's not part of the page rank part of the algorithm, but it's part of a new piece of the algorithm that's checking on social media popularity. And if stories from your site in general get shared a lot on social media, what does that tell Google about whether people trust you? But it's a very strong signal, right? Because people repeatedly are taking stuff you write and saying, hey, this is important, I'm sharing this. That all make sense?
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I'll just say this. I think this is good news for newspapers in general, because it just seems like we're kind of already doing most of this stuff, original photos and things like that. But in terms of the structure of the website and the references, that may not always be there. So thank you very much. That's helpful.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. I mean, you're in a good position as newspaper publishers in that you are creating stories and content, versus there's some people that sort of have to fake it. People that are trying to artificially scale their little business, whether it's directories or scraping stories and republishing. That's who Google's going after. So as real newspaper publishers, you're starting from a great foundation. Just got to make sure you're doing the technical things so that Google can see all that is happening.
Right.
All right, let's talk. So I grew up in Canada, so for me, hockey is a big deal. And so Wayne Gretzky, you probably all know, very famous hockey player from Edmonton. He has a very famous quote that says, "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been." And I would say in terms of what we're doing in websites for Google, we're trying to structure and build websites not based on exactly what Google is able to measure today, but the nice thing about these Google announcements with things like helpful content update is they're telling us what they're going to be looking for. Whether they can actually extract these things today and score a page based on all these various details, we don't know, but they're being real clear on what their goal is. So if they don't have it now, or they don't have it 6 months, if we're building for where they're going, then we're going to be fine. We're not going to find ourselves when the next Google Core update comes out getting slammed, because we'll actually get the boost, and other people will seem to get slammed because they weren't looking forward to what Google is planning to try to measure. So what does that mean? It means real authors for every story, not Tribune staff. It means a bio block with links. I think that Google is probably going to give you some brownie points for a bio block that has a fair bit of description that they can tell is a bio block, but it takes the links out to the other stuff that person has done, whether it's a TV show that they were on, or a book they authored, or a magazine that they write for occasionally, or whatever happens to be. Those links out really make it easy for Google to say, okay, this Michael Cottam here, with that, follow this link, here's a Michael Cottam bio page or some articles at moz.com, whatever it is. It allows Google to very easily, connect the dots and that sort of stuff. As I said before, Google on some of the stuff is kind of in kindergarten. And so just like when you take kindergartners for a walk, you make them hold on to the rope. We've got to kind of give Google that rope to hold on to with some of the stuff to make sure it's really easy for them to figure out, oh, I see what this person's profile is around the web, and they are an authority because they do this and that and the other. So that's my soapbox on the bios with links. The structured data underneath, and I'm going to go into Schema a bit more later in this presentation. There's this thing called schema.org, and it's hidden data in the page, and it allows Google to read this hidden data and understand, oh, these words here are the name of a hockey player, and These words here are the organization, Edmonton Oilers, that this hockey player is a part of. And this is his birth date, and this is his skate size, and this is his, total goals and wins, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what the schema stuff is doing. There's a kind of schema called article, and it lays out the pieces of the article, like the headline and the main description of it and when it was published. It also lays out who the author is. And within the author, you can have links called same as links to the author's profiles and other places on the web. And profiles might be their Facebook, their LinkedIn, their main bio page on your site, their Twitter, a story they wrote for some magazine once, a book that they have on Amazon, that sort of stuff. Links to related stories we talked about before. That's important to show that the publisher has authority in that space. And links to your site matter. That's really what Google is most likely using to determine the trustworthiness part of that E.E.A.T. And I said before, links in social media matter. That's probably being measured as well as the regular followed links from other sites and publications. Those links in social media are showing Google that you have some popularity. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about social media auto post?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, I dropped a message in the chat so people can check out the page for that. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We just built a WordPress plugin that sends every post published on the website to social media. It's got Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit. So it just automates that step, and it takes the teaser from the article. And we can give a demo of that at the end of the call if people want to see it, but it's really just kind of a behind the scenes thing that just automates all your social media marketing.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, let's talk about what Schema Markup is and its significance. So it's invisible in the page. It's data, just like sort of JavaScript stuff that might run your menu and stuff. The user doesn't actually see it, but it's meant to basically give Google a Cliff's Notes about what those various pieces of the page are. So it's telling Google about various entities on the page. So first of all, is this a page about a person or about a product or a news article? And what's the main entity and what's the sub-element? So it might be an article about a product written by a person. With a person, it might tell things like who the person is, where they're from, a bit about their bio, social media links. If it's a product, things like the price, the weight, the color, the brand, reviews. We'll talk about how that gets used by Google. If it's a news story, it tells it what part of the page is the headline, what part is the author, what the author's bio looks like. And now, what does Google actually do with this right now? So some of this is going to be used eventually for E.E.A.T, and maybe it's being used now, but it doesn't seem to be doing too much. We know they're going there though. If you do a search for a product, often you'll see review stars in there. And sometimes you'll see things like, if you search for a recipe, it'll show things like the recipe prep time. Or if you search for, like a concert or a show or something like that, you'll see a list of events, dates, and times. When those things get pulled out, they're getting pulled out from the structured data. So when Schema first came out, all anybody ever focused on was, oh, am I going to get these little features in the search results? Because if my rating stars show up, my click-through rate goes way up. Or for my recipe, if it shows the prep time and a rating on it, well, maybe I'll get more clicks. And so people were totally focused on that. But there's more to it now than that. So Google's also using this to try to match the kind of page they're looking at to the user intent. So if I'm looking for, let's say, if I'm looking to buy a new Nikon DSLR, I might be looking for pages that are going to have a price on it, because if there's no price on it, then they're not selling it, so I can't buy it. If I'm looking to compare the latest Nikon versus latest Canon DSLR, then I might be looking for an article or a page that has reviews. If I'm looking for, I don't know, well, anyway, you see where I'm going with this. It tells you about different kinds of things. So I'm looking for an article about Ansel Adams. I might want to look for a page where the primary schema entity is a person, Ansel Adams, versus a page where the primary entity is a collection of image objects, which would be Ansel Adams pictures. And so Google can look at these entities and go, oh, that's what this is about, and try to match, you know, what they're seeing in the search term that indicates I want to buy something, I want to research something, you know, I want to, you know, see reviews on something, that sort of thing. Let's see. In terms of expertise, authority, and trust, and E.E.A.T, that should be actually, Google's looking at structured data to see who the author is and do they have expertise in that space. If there's a video on the page, there's structured data for video. So Google is pretty good at looking at pictures and figuring out what a picture is about. They're not very good at looking at a video and figuring out what a video is about. So there's a kind of structured data for video called video object that says the title of this video is, you know, Tahiti weather, whatever it happens to be. And then inside that, then you have authorship and all the stuff like an article. But it allows Google to know a lot more about the video when they can't actually scan into the video and figure out that, oh, this is a video about Tahiti weather. All right, let's talk about AI generated content. I'm going to talk about ChatGPT, but also there's a bunch of other players out there. So in terms of generating content, ChatGPT is the one that's getting all the press, right? It comes from an organization called OpenAI. The GPT in there stands for Generative Pre-training Transformer. I don't know who ever needs to know that, but you know, everybody asks because they go, what's a GPT for? Any of these machine learning kinds of systems are what they say they're trained. What they do is they feed a pile of data. In these cases, it's pages from the internet, and then they measure other signals related to those. So the signals they might be measuring on internet documents is how much traffic did that page get? How many times did it show up in search results? What was the average time spent on that page by users when they found it from search before backing out? What was the bounce rate? That sort of stuff. And what are the links to that page? So they got 2 pages about what is ChatGPT4, and 1 page is from my personal blog. It has no links to it. Another page is from MSN.com. They're probably going to want to trust the one from MSN.com. So the training is basically feeding in the documents and then feeding in these metrics, and then, you know, tweaking the dials on this to produce, you know, decent answers, responses. ChatGPT generates very human-like responses, and really, that's probably one of the main reasons it's got so much press, is because they've done this goofy stuff about making it look like somebody's typing an answer back to you. And it's the engineers who created this are probably just like shaking their heads because marketing made them do that, right? And it's just goofy. ChatGPT recently had a really big investment from Microsoft, and that would be why it's powering the new Bing. Before ChatGPT came out, something called Jasper.ai came out. And lest you think that it's a really, really tiny player, they got 100,000 paying customers, like not just 100,000 users, but 100,000 people who are paying subscriptions to use Jasper.ai. It's very, very similar in what it generates. It started off, they sell it as something to help you generate articles, generate documents. It's only a couple years old. Their market valuation is $1.5 billion. So they're not a tiny player. They're just not getting the news much. Lambda comes from Google. It stands for Language Model for Dialogue Applications. It's kind of like the engine underneath their ChatGPT. It's conversational like ChatGPT, and it's actually used in this thing that Google unfortunately named Apprentice Bard. So Apprentice Bard is Google's equivalent to ChatGPT. And the good news is Google renames every product every 2 years, it seems anyway, so we'll get rid of that soon enough. It's a chatbot, just like ChatGPT is. So keep in mind, there's kind of 2 sides to this. One is this giant engine with the machine learning and training and documents in it. And the other is this little interface up front, which acts like a text message chat. So let's look at what AI in search results is going to be all about. So this is just a simple search, and this is not AI, this is not chat anything. This is just a featured snippet that Google is showing here. So Bing actually launched ChatGPT in the new Bing. And we'll go do a demo of that in a little bit here. It used to be there was a wait list for it for the past month or so, and you really couldn't get on. You put your email in. Now, if you go to bing.com/new, you'll put your email address in, and then within a couple seconds, you get an email that gives you access. And we're going to talk more about that because it's kind of they've done some kind of slimy, funny things. Google is still working on AI in search results. As you're probably all aware, there were a bunch of news stories soon after the big announcement of ChatGPT about how Microsoft's version of ChatGPT kind of got a little demented and had some pretty nasty answers, and then Google, proudly, a knee-jerk reaction announced that, oh yeah, we're going to have that too, and their little demo was terrible, and at the big Google conference. So this is still really in diapers. With Google, it's likely to be sort of like a featured snippets 2.0, so producing stuff like what we see on the screen here with a way to continue a conversation. That's not really how Bing's done it. So we'll see how Google finally comes out with it. Google is so concerned with that structure of that page and how things fit in, though. I don't see them making a real radical departure in terms of the layout of the page and where this is going to get featured. Got to expect there's to be cutesy animation about it to make it look different than a featured snippet, just like ChatGPT does. So how would AI engines, whatever the guys are using, change the search results? So featured snippets today is basically an excerpt from a single web page. So Google goes and says, okay, what temperature should chicken be before you take it off the barbecue? And so they'll check a whole bunch of web pages, pick one they think has the right answer, and excerpt word for word what that answer is and show it. So one answer, one web page. With AI and the chatbot, they're looking at multiple sources to confirm the accuracy. And you'll even see, before I go on, you'll even see when we do the live new Bing demo with ChatGPT4, you'll see they actually show you the sources of their answer. So you could follow up or you at least look at them and go, okay, well, if Wikipedia said this, it must be good or garbage or whatever you think about Wikipedia. That sort of thing. Google was not doing that at first. But I'm sure by the time they come out with, because they've been beaten up over that, when they come out with their version, I'm sure they'll have sources too. So anybody here know this guy? This is my friend Dwayne Forrester. Back in February. So Dwayne, he ran Bing for many years, and then he left to become vice president of E.E.A.T. And Dwayne is very big into kind of extreme off-road camping. And so he goes out with his Jeep and bunch of friends and camps in all sorts of extreme places, and takes amazing video and pictures, and et cetera, et cetera. So he has this teepee-shaped tent that's circular. It's 14 feet in diameter. And he wanted to build a wooden platform with some like eye bolts in it that he could anchor this tent down to so it didn't blow around. But he needed to be able to fit it all back in the Jeep. And so he had a limit of 4 feet that he could have these pieces of some structure to bolt this to. So he went to ChatGPT and asked it, how many 4-foot segments do I need to encircle a 14-foot diameter circle? And this is what ChatGPT came back with. And if you read this, you can see that ChatGPT did not understand the word diameter. So they took 14 feet, divided it by 4 feet, and got 3.5. And so, well, yeah, nice try. 1 week later, I typed in the exact same thing, and ChatGPT was a fair bit smarter. So it actually figured out the diameter thing, figured out what the total diameter was. Then, unfortunately, it wasn't aware that boards weren't made of rubber. And so it just divided the length of the board into the total diameter. So it's much closer, though. So much better only 6 days later. Now, why is it different? My guess is a lot of people click the down thumb on that last answer, because Dwayne's pretty well known. Lots of people follow on Facebook. And so I bet you a lot of people tried the same search and then click the down button. And that caused the learning model to go, okay, let's not use that first source. Let's pick the second choice source or whatever it happened to be. So let's talk about the new Bing. The new Bing does use the brand spanking steaming new ChatGPT4. The regular ChatGPT that we were looking at the start of this call is 3.5. And so what's the difference? They're not really saying much. It's just, bigger, stronger, shinier, more data, blah, 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 blah. They're not really telling us exactly what the details are. So the new Bing, which is not normal Bing if you go to bing.com. You only get it if you go to bing.com/new. And then I've got a little secret to show you. The regular Bing does not have ChatGPT in it. The new Bing does. And eventually, after they've milked all the press they can out of this, I'm sure they'll put it in the main engine. There used to be this wait list for it, and maybe if you're a special person and you downloaded enough Windows products, they would let you have it. But now, as soon as you go to bing.com/new and enter your email, then it's going to send you, congratulations, you've been approved. The problem is they take you to a screen for bing.com/new. It says, for the full experience, try Microsoft Edge. So they're trying to push you to use their browser. Well played, Microsoft. And it actually, it's not a matter of full experience or not. They don't let you use it unless there's a Chrome extension called Bing Unchained. So if you don't want to use the Microsoft Edge browser, you want to keep using Chrome, just go install the Chrome extension called Bing Unchained. So yesterday actually, I ran this into, and this is Bing, the new Bing. I ran the same query in there. And so this answer talks all about the diameter and pi and this and that, the other, and comes out with a 14-foot diameter circle needs 3 4-foot boards to encircle it. So it actually went backwards. But so these are the problems with using any of these AI tools to generate content. Is you better proof it. You better do some research and double check stuff. Notice at the bottom here, to learn more, this was the sources that they used to come up with this stuff. The takeaway from this is a complex enough question that it's a bit beyond these AI tools right now. 6 months or a year from now, maybe not. Let's talk about how we might use AI in good ways for content generation for newspapers. So you've probably seen some news stories about CNET and BuzzFeed getting caught generating tons of content and saying that, oh yes, we have some editorial oversight. Clearly it wasn't true. It was, the glance and publish kinds of stuff. And there'll be more people trying to do that because CNET and BuzzFeed made a crap load of money for a couple of months doing this. So it's, that drives everything. There will be people doing this. So question comes up is, what if a bunch of very authoritative sites like CNET and BuzzFeed are using the same AI tools or similar AI tools or similar machine learning database behind it to generate the content? So now when Google or Bing's chatbot or feature type of thing or whatever uses their AI to try to figure out what the answer is to a question, and they see the exact same wrong answer at a couple of strong authoritative domains because they're using AI as well, that must be right because these others are saying it. So one of the big risks of AI is too much dependence on it is a real problem. Next question would be, okay, if I'm using AI to simplify my world, or just I want to make a ton of money like CNET and BuzzFeed have been doing off this without spending any money on people, can Google spot it, and am I going to get dinged for it? So right now, I think the answer is probably not. There's a bunch of tools out there. You may have seen tools where you can run your content through the tester, and it'll give you a score, whether it's likely to be AI generated or not. In my experience, it's really hit and miss. I've tried it with a bunch of stuff. I've used AI to generate some travel articles and then fed that into these tools, and then tried editing a little bit and fed it in. And some of the tools, it's very easy to get a passing grade, and some tools incorrectly mark stuff that wasn't AI generated. So it's certainly not trustworthy yet. The other thing to consider is that for Google to run an AI analysis tool on every page of the internet to decide whether or not it was AI generated is going to be really, really expensive. It's unlikely they're going to do it. I would still recommend against doing that sort of approach, where you generate the content and do some super light proofing and editing. And from Google's mouth, the story is, hey, we don't really care if you use AI to generate the content as long as it's accurate and helpful to users. So if you use AI to generate the content and you have that editorial oversight, and you're not just regurgitating what somebody can find at every other site that talks about that topic, then you're probably going to do fine. So some of your own images in there, some of your own writing and opinion, an author on it, and not just a a generic by admin or staff or something like that. So how to use AI for and not be evil for generating content. If you think about it, ChatGPT and its twins are really not any different from using like a junior or an outsourced copywriter researcher instead of somebody who's a reporter who knows something about that at least that sort of niche or industry in general. So a real reporter might not be a subject matter expert in sort of topics. So let's say it's a business reporter. Maybe they don't know much about Hum Kombucha, which is here in Bend. It's a big kombucha maker. They might not know much about kombucha, but they know about business in Bend, and they probably know some of the people on the board of it, and they probably know a bit about the other bottling companies. And so, when Hum Kombucha says our costs are this, or we can't distribute this or this, they're probably going to have some understanding, allows them to make some sensible calls on that. So the reporter has the ability to listen to whoever they're interviewing and make a judgment call on, first of all, are they all fluff, or they actually seem to know their material? Are they all hot air? Is this somebody I've trusted in the past? Do they have a reputation? And the AI doesn't have that. So to safely leverage AI, you can use it for doing initial research. So I was talking about how I used it to create some travel articles. I was creating an article on going to St. Lucia. And so what I did is I structured my article ahead of time. I want to talk about weather. I want to talk about seasons. I want to talk about things to see and do. I want to talk about hotels. I want to talk about scuba. So I used ChatGPT to create my initial paragraph or so about each of those topics. What are the top hotels in St. Lucia? You can feed that to ChatGPT, get back that list, and then go look at them. Make sure those hotels are all still open, because ChatGPT, not the one Bing uses, not the one Google's going to use either, but the plain ChatGPT you can access is running off of data, I think, from 2021. So if a hotel had closed in 2022, it wouldn't know it. So you've got to do some of that sort of proofreading and fact checking, but it can do that general research for you pretty well. Also, as you know, writing is hard. Writing, smooth sounding sentences, can be a bunch of work. And so these AI tools can save you some time writing that first draft. It's not going to come out in the tone you'd normally write it in, but it's going to do a lot of the basic mechanics of constructing sentences to start with. It's a lot easier to proof and edit and tweak something than it is to write it from scratch. And like I said about my St. Lucia article, do it in chunks. Figure out how you want to structure your topic, and use the chat tools, use the GTP tools to do some of that research for you and bring back the meat of what you're going to want to then work into your article. And of course, at the end, do some of your own research just to see what's been missed. Maybe there's new hotels in St. Lucia since what ChatGPT knew about. Maybe there's some that's been closed, that sort of thing. So we're going to do a live example here. So give me a question here.
All right, let's open it up to the group. Anyone have a question for Bing Chat GTP? I want to open it up to the group first before I ask mine. I did, well, it'll take a minute for people to come in. I just typed in to the old Chat GTP, how can newspapers use Chat GTP? You want to try that one?
Okay.
It's pretty cool ideas that come out here.
So look what's happening here. This is kind of cool. This is not really to do with the ChatGPT, but this is kind of like Google's auto suggest as you type into a search. So as I'm typing, I type chat, and it's prompting with GPT, and I can hit tab, and it's going to fill that in. There we go. So they've got 3 sources listed and 3 more that they used to glue together and form these couple of sentences they came out with. So let's follow on with what is different about ChatGPT4. Now, with the old ChatGPT, you couldn't ask this because it didn't exist. It wouldn't have any information on it.
Right.
It's trying hard here. So this, I believe, is doing some live searching. So it's more real time. Okay, I believe that first one is correct because I was reading that yesterday. When it says it can see and understand images, it doesn't produce images usually, but you can actually upload images to it and ask it, what's in this picture, that sort of thing. I haven't tried that myself. So here's one that I know would produce an interesting result: is Putin crazy? And so you'll see something different here that we haven't seen in some of the other answers. Okay, so bails a little bit, but then pulls an entire snippet. So this looks like a featured snippet that we would see in Google, doesn't it?
Right. Interesting. Yeah, this is not the interface I'm used to. I've just been using OpenAI's website. Bing is cool though. We have a question from Tracy. I just want to see what will come out here. Will ChatGPT offer a perspective? Example, should journalists use ChatGPT to help writing their stories?
So I would say yes to the help, right? So great for doing that research, great for helping you organize your thoughts, great for, if you ask it to write a 500-word article about something, you're going to get a fair bit of depth, and you can use that and skim that, say, okay, in what I'm actually going to write, did I cover everything they brought up, or did I not think of something? Right? So just like if you stepped away from ChatGPT and you just went to Google and you did 20, 30, 40 Google searches about that topic, and you read 4 or 5 articles from each of those, you're going to get about the same kind of information. But with ChatGPT, it's going to be a lot faster. What you're not going to get is, if you read 20 articles about ChatGPT 4.0, you probably have a pretty solid idea of what's conjecture and what's real and what, when things were announced. Whereas if you just ask ChatGPT that, and it says, ChatGPT4 is used by Bing and Google, you might not know that's not true, right? So you still have to do that research. When I was doing my St. Lucia article, so when I do my travel articles, I'm usually in the range of probably 12 hours for an article, and I knocked this one out in about 4. I still had to go find a bunch of images. I still had to, go and get links to hotels and all that sort of stuff, and structure it, do the layout, that. But the core of it and the core writing, it saved me a ton of time. Then I went back through and I didn't like the tone of voice, and it didn't match the rest of my site. And so I tweaked it. And as an example, if you've used the regular ChatGPT a lot, you'll notice that in most things, most of its answers, it'll say, it's worth noting that something. Okay, that gets pretty repetitive. I wouldn't want that phrase, 7 times in my St. Lucia article. So you'll do some rewriting like that.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. One idea that just came to mind would be if you want a TLDR version of an article, right? You could take a full newspaper article and turn it into a paragraph and say, just summarize this article. Yeah. So, okay, good. All right. So yeah, because Tracy wanted to clarify, how would ChatGPT answer the question, will ChatGPT offer a perspective on news articles?
Okay, let me type that in then.
Sure. And if you haven't already, I think it's pretty much still open. You can go log on and create your own. You just need a Gmail account or something on OpenAI, and you can play with this as much as you want. Let's see.
Yeah, and that was it had some restrictions a few weeks ago. They were just getting too much use, but that's been opened up. And if you want to try ChatGPT4, then go to bing.com/new. You'll have to put some email address in there, and then it'll send you that. Then go install the Bing Unchained Chrome extension, and then you'll get what we're looking at right here.
Got it. Very cool.
So
That's
by the way, the way you get to this,
Bing Unchained.
if you just start at bing.com, once you've got that extension installed, this is what Bing looks like.
Oh, cool.
So,
yeah.
So this is Dwayne with his tent. Okay, so look what happened here. This is a featured snippet looking thing right here. Right down here, it says type of messages.
So this is like a follow-up question to the result.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what we've been told is that this is conversational, and so that the next answer is going to take into consideration what the first question was. So I didn't have to type Forrester.
Right. Wow.
Okay. This is not very helpful. So ChatGPT should have asked me. So Dwayne, by the way, also hand makes custom electric guitars out of all sorts of fabulous woods. He's got a company called Acanthus Guitars. Anyway.
Oh.
So I was thinking that they might pull that up because his name's all over that website, but they're not connecting the dots well enough yet. They need more same as links in their schema. Okay.
Right. Holy cow. Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. So that's it for my presentation. What do we have for questions?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, great. Thank you, Michael, so much. Let's definitely open it up to the group. If you'd like to even just ask your question verbally, I can invite you to speak. Just let me know in the chat, or you could just type the question. I had a couple, actually, since we're talking about kind of like input output, I don't know. I guess it seems to me it's not really a question. It's just kind of like a talking point. It seems like there's a big difference that you mentioned with the output on this in terms of, search 1.0 was just links and sometimes snippets. Now it's very conversational. It also seems like the big difference is the input can be conversational, and you don't need to think like Google's search anymore.
Yeah. So whereas with a regular Google search, you refine your search by adding more things to it. In a regular Google search, I would have had to type Dwayne Forrester, not just Dwayne. Google was talking about going that direction where your next searches would depend a bit on your prior searches, but I don't think they're treating it as conversational yet. It's more about, well, the last time when you search for, so here's a great example I use when I'm talking about keyword research. So if you search for blenders on Google, you'll get a bunch of pictures of things to help you make a margarita and a whole bunch of results like that. If you search for blender singular, you might think, oh, Google's smart. They know singular versus plural, right? You'll get the same thing. No, you don't. There's an open source thing. I think it's some sort of image processing thing called blender.org. And apparently lots and lots of nerdy image processing people search for that, and it gets lots of clicks. So if you type Blender, most of the results on page 1 in Google are this open source stuff. If Google knows you've clicked into that and you've searched Blender a bunch, then as you search other terms, you might get slightly different results. If you search for, let's see, well, Near Me is a bad example. But Google is looking at things you clicked on before, and it'll also surface things in the search results higher than it would normally if it knows you clicked on that before. So for doing my web development, for instance, I use a site called W3 Schools all the time for all sorts of like examples and tricks for CSS and JavaScript and HTML and garbage like that. And because I frequently click on the W3 Schools results in general for a brand new query, Google will surface those W3 Schools results higher than they would something else with the same page rank and the same content and that sort of stuff. And so that's all Google's doing, whereas this conversational thing we just saw with New Bing, it's using the terms that were in your prior searches as if they're part of your current search terms. So it didn't have to ask me if I was talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, right? I must have been talking about Dwayne Forrester because it's part of the same conversation.
Right. So cool. Okay. I have a couple other quick questions, but Melissa has one. I want to make sure we get this answered. And looks like Aaron just dropped one. Um, so when we have a story, I just want this to be totally clear. When we post a story to our newspaper website, it first shows as by editor. So I'm guessing that's in the byline. The journalist's byline appears in the body of the story post.
Okay.
However, could that be a problem for SEO?
It depends whether Google can spot that that's the bio. And so if you're Google and you're trying to scan a page and figure out where the bio is, you'd be looking for words like by and then two words which are not common English words, right? So there's a name,
Right.
or author, or about, and then two words. So those kinds of patterns would be relatively easy to spot. So as long as you've got something like that. So let's say instead all you have in the bio, it says Michael Cottam is blah 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 blah. Well, that doesn't look any different to Google than if somebody quoted me in the middle of an article, right? So Google wouldn't think I'm necessarily the author. If it says, you know, about the author, or about Michael Cottam, or about the
Right.
reporter, or one of these other signals, and you have it in a block that's separate, like a separate HTML div from everything else, so it's set apart, it's visually separate, it's structurally separate, that's what you got to be going after.
Got
And
it.
if you can get rid of just the editor thing at the top, that might help too.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like the answer is they could figure it out, but ideally you structure it a little bit for the bots and put the bylines separately, not in the body tags, I think, Melissa.
Yeah, and just back to my thing about kindergarten and holding onto the rope, right?
Right.
Don't make Google work too hard at this, right?
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect
So
sense.
I see Aaron's question, and that's a
Yeah.
good one. That's so first of all, for paywalled content, there's some Google recommendations in terms of structured data, where
Right.
in the structured data that's hidden, you can show Google all the content and you can say, here's the stuff that's publicly visible, and here's the stuff that is visible to a subscriber, and Google will look at it all, index it, and look at it all to decide how good an article it is. Because obviously the normal paywall thing is you get a snippet, which isn't much of a search result, right? But
Right.
by marking up with this paywall structured data in there, what the rest of the article is, Google would say, oh, this isn't a 500 word or a 300 word thing. This is a 1,500 word article and it has 4 pictures in it or whatever, right? And so that's how to do it technically. The big question is, will ChatGPT and Google's Apprentice Bard and Jasper, will these tools punch through that and index that? My guess is that they won't, because of the PR backlash they would get for doing that. They right now, with so many lawsuits going on, they don't need any more negative publicity about how Google is evil and stealing revenue and things like that, because they're taking a lot of heat for that right now, especially in Europe. So my guess is this won't end up being like a paywall hack where they extract that without permission. Can they? Absolutely, they can. So if you want to read what's behind a paywall and it's the paywall structure is happening that way, just right click and view source on the page. It's ugly, but you can read all the text. So the tools could do the same thing. The question would be, will the tools do that? And my guess is no, just because of the bad publicity they did.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I mean, like, people could kind of see how much of their own content, like these publishers that are on the call with us now, they could just try ChatGPT and type in some local figures and see how much it kind of knows about their local community, right? Based on the scraping of their current site.
Yeah, and for background stuff, like intro stuff to an article, foundational stuff, so here in Bend, we've got this river that flows through town, and there's a little dam, there's a big pond called Mirror Pond, and there's an endless controversy about whether it needs to be dredged and who's going to pay for it and stuff like that. So as some news story comes out of city council about some decision, whatever, great way to leverage something like ChatGPT to to, give me the history of dredging of Mirror Pond.
Right.
And now you've got that big chunk of like generic content that's not generic, but background content that is necessary background info in your article to be the foundation behind, okay, what's happened this time.
Right.
Question about the recency of the new version of ChatGPT. Less than a week old. I think the announcement, well, they've had 4 running for a while, but you had to be on the wait list and actually gotten past the wait list for a few weeks. So it's quite new. It was just really, I think, officially released in the last week or so. So you could ask New Bing when ChatGPT4 is released, but you couldn't ask ChatGPT because ChatGPT, all of its data comes from 2021 documents and earlier. Whereas the Bing one, let's ask it. Once again, this is probably the right answer, but I wouldn't go and publish this. Okay, so officially announced March 13th. See the second sentence? It's only available in the ChatGPT Plus paid subscription. Not true, because you can access it through New Bing. So there's that's almost like a little pre-planned back up to my thing. You need to verify everything to come back with.
Right. I got a quick question, and I think let's try to get all our questions in the next couple of minutes because we'll probably wrap up the webinar shortly. Looks like Melissa has one in too. I was just curious about the API. A lot of the publishers on here are on work with our hometown, and we're working with the API and we're developing products. But I'm just curious what you know about that, like in terms of how a newspaper could create their own chat bot that's just using their data and maybe is only available to paying subscribers. Anything that you can comment on with that, or any examples that you've seen of that?
So there's 2 pieces to these AI tools. One is the machinery that does the analysis and handles the searches and does the scoring and the learning and that sort of stuff. And the other is the data you feed it. If what you fed it was just articles from your own publication, I think that wouldn't be a lot different than just doing a site search, because
Gotcha.
You're not going to have enough documents for it to learn about what's right. So what's right and what's wrong in terms of what's the population of Bend, Oregon is very, very simple.
Right.
Versus more complex queries like what's the background of the Mirror Pond dredging controversy. That's a much tougher thing to do, and you need a lot of data to get anything more than just something that's searching for keywords in your old articles. So when they're talking about the documents that ChatGPT uses, is
right.
I think it's going to be trillions.
Right.
And when you get that much data, then the machine learning works a lot better.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question, though. I mean, it's real basics. It's just it gets really down to the engineering level, but it's like if I wanted to have a chat bot, I would want it to be as smart as the worldwide GTP, but with like kind of it would just sort of I don't know, tilt its answers towards local people. Like if I were to search, I don't know, if there was like a local Joe Biden, it's the same name, it would prioritize the local Joe Biden over the national. You know what I mean? Like something like that. I don't know if that even makes sense, but it's Yeah.
So what I'm doing here is I'm looking for past stories from the newspaper. So I'm using the overall corpus, the body of documents that it's the entire world of documents that ChatGPT looks at, but in my query, I'm telling it to just pull stuff from there.
Cool. Right. Yeah,
And this is okay. So
exactly.
this is working. And it's not just pulling from Ben Bulletin. The first one is our newspaper here, Oregon Lives of Portland one, OPB is Oregon Public Broadcasting. So
Okay.
you could use this externally from any of your own tools, and by structuring your query the way I did, by mentioning your newspaper,
Right.
get to do a link back. So I can then go in here,
Right.
see on the one, and I can click there, and here's the article. And so if you're building an article for your newspaper and you want to link back to some of your past articles in your newspaper, this is a great way to do it, right? Because unlike plain ChatGPT, which gives you no sources, references, like this is awesome. So if I want to see, well, what did Oregon Live say about this? I mean, this interface here is really nice. I think this could be super useful for a reporter or researcher.
I mean, yeah, that just makes it so much more transparent. You know, I think a lot of people are like just suspicious of AI. It's like, how are they putting this information together? They're summarizing it. But yeah, with the footnotes, that seems perfect. We got a question from Melissa here. I think this might be one of our last. So this is an interesting one. I'm being asked repeatedly to consider publishing paid editorials on our website by quote unquote writers. Is there any way I can tell if their writings are AI generated? Is this something I should be considering more seriously?
So
What do you think?
so yes, there's tools that can check that out for you and give you a score. I think the tools are quite unreliable. I tried 2 or 3 of them and got radically different results from them. So I wouldn't trust the tools. Instead, if somebody wants to write for you, if they're a legit writer, I would expect their outreach email to have some links to past stories they've written. And are those written for real publications or junk private blog network stuff?
Got it.
If the person doesn't have a bio, so the first thing I look for, and you probably all get emails every day about how they can help you with your SEO or redesign your website, whatever. If the person's name in the email doesn't come close to matching the email address name, okay, that's a really bad start, right? So if Gary Lewis from Ben here wants to write for an Indiana newspaper, Gary's going to have his name at garylewis.com and links to his TV show and links to his newspaper column here or whatever, and say, hey, I'm going to be in wherever it is, deer hunting. Do you want to store up your paper with that? That would be pretty legit. When you get the generic sounding ones, they're just looking to place links, paid links for clients, right?
Right.
Like if you're not getting a real author. So just like Google's looking for a real author with real bio and real things to indicate credentials. So I would say the answer there is put yourself in the same shoes as Google and try to figure out, would you trust a story from this person? Because if you can't tell who the person is enough to trust them, and they don't have any credentials, Google's going to feel the same way, right?
Right.
And so will your readers, right?
Right. Yeah.
What's probably going to happen in the bad versions of that is you'll get a fluff article that's clearly written just to provide a link, for cheap mortgage refi or some crap like that, right?
Right.
And they're like, oh, really? And then just delete it, but you wasted all of your own time up to then. So I would say, a quick Google search on their name. Does their name match their email? Does it come from a real domain? If it's Gmail, that's not necessarily bad, right? But take their name, see if they seem to have some expertise behind whatever it is they want to write about. Because the legit folks will. So when I do outreach to get articles on other search marketing sites for my own backlinks and my own brand development stuff like that, I include links to my articles at moz.com. I include, I spoke at SearchFest and MozCon and Innotech and whatever else, because I know they get 100 in this day, right? And I want them to go, oh, wait, this guy has some creds. Okay. And then they'll read more.
Right.
Anybody doing outreach professionally should know that. And you might find somebody who's legit who just doesn't know how to do this, but if you Google them and they seem to be legit, well, okay, maybe there's something there.
Makes sense.
And I wouldn't worry about whether the article was AI written or not. I would read their article
Right.
and say, does this smell funny to me?
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what you said earlier. Google doesn't really actually care as long as it's accurate. So
Yeah.
if it's like copywriters in AI, as long as it's being edited for accuracy. Valerie just has a comment here. That is an interesting idea. Real writer versus an AI writer. Credibility becomes even more important. Thinking about my students entering the workforce. And Melissa just says, thank you for this webinar and for answering your questions. It's been very helpful. Thank you for your questions, Melissa. It's really wonderful.
So Valerie, here's an answer there. So you got students who are entering the workforce, just graduated, they don't have creds, right? But they do have some creds. Let's say whatever they studied in college, we presume that's going to be relevant for what the workforce they just entered. They didn't do an electrical engineering degree and decided to become a photographer or something like that. And so there's their credentials. If they don't have things published yet, their bio is, bachelor's degree in X from university, whatever, and whatever else you got. One thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to be Thomas Friedman, right? You don't have to be that famous. If you look at the competition of people writing articles about anything, an awful lot of publishers out there don't even show who the author's name is. Or if they do show the author's name, that's all they show. And so Google goes, Michael Cottam. Well, I don't know. There's some famous cricket player apparently named Michael Cottam. Is it that one or the SEO guy or whatever? If all you've got is the name with no other bio stuff, then you've got no credentials. So all you've got to do is be better than that. So if your student is Michael Cottam, who just graduated from a degree in internet marketing or whatever, and it's a story about internet marketing, Google looks at that and goes, okay, that's better than this other Michael Cottam that I know nothing about.
Okay.
The other thing to note is what BuzzFeed and CNET have done is generated generic articles, and maybe they're stuffing stock photos in it. Google can spot stock photos, right? So before all this AI talk and helpful content update and things like that, Google cared about is that page got some original stuff. They've been doing reverse image search and been able to tell if something's a stock photo for 5 or 10 years. So if you're generating a 2,000 word article and you've got your body text in the headline and you press publish, that's not very interesting to Google or humans. Embed a couple images in it, embed a video in it. Okay, now that's starting to get interesting. What I tell my SEO clients when they're creating content for their blogs is, if you're gonna write a blog post and not put any images in it and not also record a video, the video might be just you talking to the camera and reading the blog post. If you're not going to put the video in there, don't bother writing it at all, because you get such a boost from Google when your page has things to look at, video to watch, as well as all the text and the keywords and things like that. That's a lot better piece of content for a human being than 2,000 words. We're all tired of reading, right?
Right. All right. I think we've gone over time, so I appreciate everything that you brought to the table, Michael. I mean, really,
You're welcome.
you're on the cutting edge here.